So today I'm going to talk about two books. One of them is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and the other is The Return of the Young Prince. It's by A.G. Romers. And why I'm reviewing these two books in one video or at one go, because these are written on the same topic, or shall I say the second one is a continuation or a sequel of the other one. But the interesting fact is they are written by two different writers. So basically, The Return of the Young Prince is basically a fan fiction or a response or a continuation of the first book, The Little Prince, which is by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. So The Little Prince was a very famous book. It became very popular after its publication, and it's about, as you can see, there are many illustrations here. So this book is not just text-based novella. This is basically a novella that comes with illustrations. So that is what makes this book very interesting and different from other novellas. And even though this looks like a very children book, that it has images with it, or shall I say that cartoonistic illustrations with it, but the beauty of this book is that this is for people for all age. Even if this is specifically a very good book for the adults, because they can learn a lot. They can learn a lot from this book. So the first book, The Little Prince, the author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, he was an aviator, and surprisingly, this book is the story of this book is told from is narrated from the point of view of an aviator. So the story is that an aviator, one day he gets lost in a desert, in Sahara Desert, and there he finds a creature, and that creature is basically Little Prince. As we can see that this is Little Prince. This is the caricature of the Little Prince, which became very popular later on. And this character, Little Prince, comes up, he claims that he is from a different planet, and he is very little. He asks very silly little childish questions. But the beauty of this book is that through his narration, or through the Little Prince's account to the earth, since he is an alien in the earth, that is how it is portrayed in this book. But through Little Prince's account, we adults and we people who live in earth, who are very practical towards our lives, we experience a very different perspective of our living or our thinking towards the life and towards everything. And what I love about this book is that it talks about very complex issues of our human life, of adulthood, and most of it you will find that it's trying to find out the faults in the adults. But then again, when we read it from Little Prince's perspective, we will get to know some real thoughtful findings. And what I loved about this book, about the writing of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, is that it's written in a very simplistic way. I mean, the sentences, if you see one or two sentences, if you can read, they are written in a very simplistic way. So every sentence, everything that is written, they are very simple. So anyone who's a beginner, who's not much into reading, even they can start and find this book interesting, because the language is very easy, very simplistic. And the beauty of this book is, even after having a very simplistic language, a very simplistic sentence structure, it makes you realize many crucial things and very crucial aspects of life in a way you never thought of before. So that is what a beautiful aspect I found about this book, and I think that is one beautiful aspect of literature itself, that it's not the right idea that literature has to become very complex and writing has to be very complex, storytelling has to be very difficult, very structured. But through simplistic way, through simplistic drawing and everything, you can deliver what you want to say. Even if the thought is very complex and very tough, you can deliver it. So that is one beautiful thing I found after reading this book. And yeah, I would say, if I have to say what are my favorite books, Little Prince comes there in the top 5 of the books in my favorite lists. So the next book is The Return of the Little Prince, the Return of the Young Prince, and this is basically a fan response of A.G. Romer's, and as you can see, this book also has illustrations in it. So this book talks about the narrator. So we believe the narrator is the author himself here. So one day the narrator finds a stranger teenager guy on his way to going somewhere, and he picks that guy in his car, and from there their journey starts. So we lately discovered that this guy is the young boy he took in his car is basically the little prince who was lost from this book, The Little Prince. And here he finds another friend, which is the new narrator of this book, and he is facing his teenage time, and we see this new young prince's encounter with the narrator. So for the Little Prince fans, this is a big thing, that the prince who was lost in this book, though I shouldn't be mentioning the ending clearly, but yes, at the end of this book there is no proper conclusion that where the little prince goes. We're giving us some beautiful viewpoints of life and everything. He goes away somewhere, but that little prince comes back in this book, and he comes back as a teenager boy this time. And one difference, I would say, obviously different writer has different approach of writing, but A.G. Romer's writing, what I found, they are very, very complex. He writes one idea in 2, 3, 4 sentences, and they are very complex, what I find. But then again, every writer has their own style. Maybe this is his style. And here again, even after being very complex with his structure, we see the encounter of the young prince here about life and everything. And even here, we understand very complex issues of life in a very different from a very different perspective of the prince. So even though the writer is different, the writing style is different, the essence of the prince, the little prince and here the young prince, the essence of the prince that helping us to know life and see life from a different angle is still there. So that is a beautiful thing that continues to this book as well, which I loved. And what I loved about the whole journey of me completing this book is that throughout this book they talk about very complex issues such as love, money, happiness, success. So we human are very complex in our own life to find the answers of these questions, of these problems, of these topics. But here we see that the protagonist, the narrator, is also dealing with such questions, or such the narrator itself is very jumbled with this question, with such topics in their own life. But when little prince or the young prince comes, the little prince present life in such a way that gives us a very different perspective in a very simplistic approach. So every time I read these two books, it gives me different findings and different perspective towards life, which I find amazing about this little prince journey. So these are very gist ideas that I have discussed. And there is another thing, is that this notebook, as you can see, it has Humayun Ahmed's image in it. And what I do is, the books I read, The lines I find very interesting. I write them down here with my own handwriting. So I remember writing down many lines from here, from the book The Little Prince. So The Little Prince has some really beautiful perspectives towards life. So those I wrote down here, and that is why I often go through those to even myself to understand life a little better and to know it a little better. And that's the beauty of these two books. So I would request everyone, whoever is interested, these are just the very minimalistic gist I have shared about after finishing these two books. But I would request people to inbox me if they want to talk more about these two books, because again, as I always say, that I can talk for hours and hours regarding these two books. So you're welcome to have discussions with me regarding these books. Thank you.